So can I have these? Yeah. Oh, thank you.
Recording in progress.
I got it.
Okay, we'll call this meeting to order of the Planning Commission of Hollister. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Commissioner Huboy, could you lead us?
Certainly. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, roll call, please.
Chair Henderson,
Present.
Commissioner Huboy,
Here.
Commissioner Corona,
Here.
Commissioner Belong,
Present. Commissioner
Lenore.
Present.
Verification of agenda posting. The agenda was posted on Friday, February 3rd, 2023 at 1:15 p.m.
Thank you. Approval of minutes. Do we have any comments on the minutes? All right. Can we get a motion to approve the minutes? Oh, there's no minutes. My bad. That last meeting, we didn't have minutes last time either, so. Okay. All right, public input. This is the time for anyone in the audience to speak on any item not on the agenda and within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Planning Commission. Speaking cards are available in the lobby and are to be completed and given to the secretary before speaking. When the secretary calls your name, please come to the podium, state your name and city for the record, and speak to the City Planning Commission. If you are joining us by Zoom, please click on the bottom of your screen to raise your hand. If you are joining us by Zoom using a cell phone, please press *9. Each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes with a maximum of 30 minutes per subject. Please note that state law prohibits the Planning Commission from discussing or taking action on any item not on the agenda. Do we have any speakers?
I have no speakers.
Okay, we'll close the public input. We'll move on to item 1 of the public hearings. This is tentative map 2021-1, conditional use permit 2021-6 for a planned unit development site and architectural review 2021-4 extension. Can we get the staff report?
Great. Yes, and this is going to be Mindy Davis. Let me see. Oh, it looks like we have a PowerPoint.
Oh, yay.
Sorry, I've been having technical difficulties. Let me go ahead and share screen here. Alrighty, Mindy, go ahead.
Okay. Good evening, members of the commission. My name is Mindy Davis, and tonight I'll be presenting to you the request for extension of time for previously approved tentative map 2021-1 conditional use permit for a planned unit development 2021-6 and site and architectural review 2021-4. The project is located at 1620 Buena Vista Road. Next slide. The project was previously presented and approved by the Planning Commission on May 21st of 2021. Next slide, please. For this request, the applicant is requesting a 2-year extension for the previous approvals to subdivide an approximately 11.10 acre parcel into 130 multifamily units across 48 duplexes and triplex buildings. The project site is located within the medium density residential performance overlay zoning district at 1620 Buena Vista Road. A mitigated negative declaration was previously approved on February 16, 2016 by the way of pre-zone 2013-2 for the pre-zone and the annexation of the subject property. Next slide, please. The extension of time as proposed does not include any revisions and or additions to the originally approved tentative map conditional use permit for a planned unit development and the site and architectural review. Next slide, please. As it was previously determined in 2021, the City of Hollister's 2005 through 2023 general plan designates the project site as medium density residential, which allows for the multifamily developments, which also allows for 8 to 12 dwelling units per acre. Since the request for the extension of time does not propose any additions and or revisions to the original approvals, the proposed development is still consistent with the density requirements of the general plan. Additionally, the requested extension is pursuant to the City of Hollister's Municipal Code Section 16.40.101B, time limits to record a final map, and Section 17.24.130E2, permit implementation, time limits, extensions, and revocations, which allows for the applicant to request an extension of time to their original approvals for their project. Next slide, please. As such, with this information as presented by staff, the following options are presented to the Planning Commission for consideration. One, adopt a resolution approving the 2-year extension for the approved vesting tentative map 2021-1 conditional use permit 2021-6 for a planned unit development, a site and architectural review 2021-14 for the subject to the existing conditions of approval as seen in attachment 1 of the staff report. Adopt a resolution approving a 2-year extension for the approved vesting map 2021-1 conditional use permit 2021-6 for a planned unit development and a site and architectural review 2021-14 with existings of conditions of approval as modified by the Planning Commission. 3, deny the proposed extension of time. Or 4, continue the hearing and direct staff to provide additional information and or further clarification. It is staff's recommendation that the Planning Commission select option 1 and approve the requested extension of time. Thank you very much. Are there any questions?
Yeah, any questions for staff? Okay, looks like we have no questions. We can open the public comment section at 6:10. Any speakers?
Michael Kuiper.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you for your time this evening, and thank you to Mindy and Eva for their assistance with this item. My name is Michael Kuiper. I'm here tonight on behalf of the applicant 1620 Buena Vista LLC, which is a subsidiary of Kuiper Homes. Kuiper Homes is a private family-owned home building company, and we've been building in Hollister since 2017. Our most recent project was the Westfield subdivision, which is located immediately adjacent to this project. Mindy gave you some background. We received our tentative map approval in May of 2021. Since then, we've been diligently processing our improvement plans and final map. Currently, our improvement plans are about to go into their 4th round of plan check. This process has taken us quite a bit longer than we originally anticipated, and unfortunately, the real estate market has changed a lot in that time period. We are 100% committed to building this project, and we hope to own these units in Hollister for a very long time. But due to recent market conditions, we would just like some additional time before we need to record our final map. Without this extension, we would need to record our final map before our tentative map expires this May. This extension will provide us with a buffer to complete our improvement plans and hopefully see construction costs come down somewhat from their sky-high pandemic levels. We are requesting only an extension of our existing approval, and we are not seeking any new development rights. We hope that the Commission will agree with staff's recommendation and select option 1, approving our extension subject to the existing conditions of approval. And last but not least, I would appreciate an opportunity to speak again if there are any questions or comments from the Commission. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Piper from the Commission? Okay, next speaker.
Thank you.
I have no other speaker cards and no hands in the virtual audience.
Okay, we'll close the public comment at 6:12. So what are?
Would you like a motion?
Yes.
Do we have a resolution number?
This will be a 2023-3.
Dash 3?
Yes.
I move that we adopt resolution 2023-3 approving the 2 years extension for the tentative map 2021-1 and CUP 2021-6, subject to the existing conditions of approval.
Thank you. We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call vote.
Sorry, we have tech over here. Commissioner Huboy,
Yes.
Chair Henderson,
Yes.
Commissioner Corona,
Yes.
Commissioner Belong,
Yes.
Commissioner Lenore.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes 5-0. We move on to item number 2, conditional use permit 2024-4. Staff report, please.
Thank you. This will be Associate Planner Liz Gagliardi.
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Liz Gagliardi. I'll be presenting item 2, which is for conditional use permit 2022-4. So this conditional use permit is a request from Target Corporation is the applicant. And this is the project location at 1790 Airline Highway. This is within an existing commercial subdivision. As I said before, the applicant is Target Corporation. The location, 1790 Airline Highway. This is within the existing Target retail store. It's in the general commercial zoning district with the same general plan designation. And they are requesting the approval of a conditional use permit to allow for the sale of beer, wine, and distilled spirits at the existing Target retail store. And just to clarify, this application does not propose any changes to the facade of the building or the existing site plan. So the permit requirements brought before you today are first for the conditional use permit. This is ultimately a determination of the City Council. So the task before you tonight is to provide recommendation from the Planning Commission. The conditional use permit is required by our zoning ordinance for off-site sales of alcohol. An additional permit requirement that will be associated with this is the ABC license. So these are issued by the California Department of Alcoholic Beverage Control. So these are overseen and issued by the state of California, but they are required for off-site sales of alcohol. Currently, Target does have a existing Type 20 off-sale beer and wine license, so they are allowed to sell beer and wine at their store. What they're seeking with ABC is to apply for a Type 21 off-sale general license, which would allow them to sell beer, wine, and distilled spirits. So in addition to those ABC licenses, this will require a finding of public convenience or necessity. So ABC has issued to the city a Type 245 form, and this requires the city to make a finding of public convenience or necessity before they can be issued a new license through ABC. PCN is required when there is deemed to be an over-concentration of alcohol licenses within a census tract. As you can see here, ABC has authorized 4 off-sale general licenses within Census Tract 7.02, where Target is located, and there are currently 9 licenses issued. And just to give some more context about the census tracts to which I'm referring, census tracts are established based on population. The map to your left shows the census tracts within San Benito County, and then a zoom in of the census tracts within the city of Hollister. And Target is located within Census Tract 7.02. So just an overview of the operations at Target's existing store. They're currently open between the hours of 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. Prior to COVID, they were open until 11 p.m. and may go back to those extended hours in the future. The existing Target store sells, retail items as well as full range grocery items. And with this application, they're looking to add distilled spirits to their product offerings, in addition to the already available beer and wine, with the intention to make available a more complete shopping experience and add convenience to their customers. They also offer training, policies, and protocols to their employees, and these are in place to ensure safety of the store and safety of their customers. And that includes video surveillance around the store. They also have asset protection personnel, which are there to monitor the interior and exterior of the store during their business hours. They offer training to the cashiers to make sure that they're prepared for responsible alcohol sales. And their POS system at the cash registers is also set up to monitor and screen for underage sales with some prompts for their cashiers during checkout. So staff's analysis of this proposed project, we've determined that the proposed use is consistent with the uses allowed in the general commercial zoning district. It aligns with the existing retail and grocery options that are available at Target. As I said before, they are not proposing any changes to the facade of the existing store and no changes to the site design. So this is just a conditional use permit looking at that specific use of alcohol sales. This is consistent with the goals and policies of the general plan, and this project is exempt from CEQA as it is pursuant to Class 1 existing facilities. So there are 3 options for the Planning Commission tonight. The first is to adopt a resolution approving a recommendation to the City Council that they approve Conditional Use Permit 2022-4. The second is to adopt a resolution to approve a recommendation that the City Council deny the conditional use permit with findings provided by the Planning Commission, or you may choose to continue the hearing and direct staff to provide additional information or further clarification. And staff is recommending option 1 for this item. We also have a resolution regarding the finding of public convenience or necessity. 3 options as well for this resolution. The first is that the Planning Commission adopt a resolution recommending that the City Council make a determination that public convenience or necessity would be served with the issuance of a Type 21 ABC license by the Alcohol Beverage Control at the existing Target store. The second option would be to adopt a resolution recommending that the City Council make a determination that public convenience or necessity would not be served with the issuance of the Type 21 ABC license, or the third option to continue the public hearing and direct staff to provide additional information. We also recommend option 1 for this item. That concludes my staff report. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you. Any questions for staff?
Does the, please, Chairman, sometimes I forget to ask. You would adopt the resolution for the findings prior to the resolution for the CUP? Or the other way?
So the
Which
two
one first?
the two go together. I believe we have the conditional use permit first, with the finding followed.
Okay.
And it's to
Two
clarify.
separate resolutions?
2 separate resolutions, and both are to provide a recommendation to the City Council.
Okay. Any other questions? Could you show the map again of the zones?
This one, the census tracts?
Yes, thank
Okay.
you. Yeah, I was just trying to tell what that section 702 is covering, which streets. I guess it's the right side is Airline Highway.
Yeah, and the census tracts, for a little bit of additional background, they are based off of population.
Mm-hmm.
So the boundaries are a little bit irregular. They don't align necessarily with the city's boundaries, but they are based on the population density within that area.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
If there are no other questions, then we will open the public comment at 6:22. Any speakers?
Yes, I have a few speakers. The first will be Jagsir Brock.
Hi everyone, I'm Jesse Broad. I own the gas station right there in town. And I would recommend that getting license in the Target will be really good convenience for public. So because since Kmart is closed, almost look like everybody's end up shopping in Target. When I'm there for something small little thing, whatever that could be, then I can have to run to the liquor store to buy my liquor. So I can do the whole 9 yards there and get out of there. And second thing I will say is, big store like Target, Costco is way cheaper than the going to the liquor store. Since today's economy, everybody's suffering for money, and everything's so damn expensive. So if anything we can get cheaper for public, I think that will benefit. That's all I have to say. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
You got it.
The next speaker will be Gurlian Brar.
Good evening. Good evening. I would also like to follow his recommendation as well of the convenience for the city. One thing that we've noticed with Hollister is it's continuously growing, and that's, what we're hoping for, just kind of the betterment of the city overall. And I think having the convenience of having one-stop shop just to have, all of our grocery. I know that Target, we've kind of seen it as a little bit more of, Kmart, where we're doing a little bit more of like clothing shopping or kind of finding everyday needs, but it's kind of turned over time into more of a grocery store as well. So I think that definitely with having more of like the spirits in there, since they already have both wine and beer, it kind of does have that one-stop shop as well. For me personally, I've lived a few years away from Hollister when I was in college, and I actually had no idea that our local Target doesn't have alcohol sales here. I thought it was just one of those things that I assumed that Target just kind of always has. So I would follow that recommendation as well, just for the convenience overall, so we're not having to make multiple stops on our shopping trips, and just kind of be able to get all of our shopping done at one time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and then the last speaker I see is online Beth Abulafia. I'm going to go ahead and allow you to speak. You should be able to unmute, Beth.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, commissioners. My name is Beth Abulafia. I represent Target, and I handle the alcohol licensing for Target in California. The staff report, I think, was very complete, so I'll keep my comments brief, but just for some context, Target has already been mentioned, has been selling beer and wine at this store since 2006. And since that time, the Target's business model has changed to include a much more significant grocery component. And as part of that expanded grocery presence, Target would like to be able to offer customers the full array of alcoholic beverage products while they're there shopping for other items. Most other Target stores, I think, as was perhaps alluded to by the last speaker, most Target stores in California do sell a full range of alcoholic beverages, including distilled spirits. And so we would like to offer that to the shoppers at the Target Hollister store as well. The police department have no objections. We appreciate the comments of support, and would hope that the commission would give us a positive recommendation. I will say one other point with respect to the finding of public convenience or necessity. As was indicated, it's based on the number of allowable licenses within the census tract based on population. And while there are existing 9 licenses in the census tract, one of those 9 is Target's beer and wine license. And so if this application is approved, Target will be surrendering its beer and wine license in place of the new Type 21 license. So even if this application is approved, the number of active off-sale licenses in the census tract will not change. And so with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that any of the commissioners may have.
Any questions for the speaker?
I have one. What's Target's policy for? Obviously, I'm sure it's basically, what's Target's policy for people consuming alcohol in the parking lot?
Well, Target has asset protection personnel who monitor the store and also monitor the area outside the store. If it would not be something that Target would encourage or permit. Now, the store director, Puya Dabiri, I believe, is also online. Is that correct?
Yes.
And he might be able to speak to this as well. But whether the approach would be to try to address the situation themselves or contact the police department, I believe Mr. Dabiri might be able to speak to that.
Okay, give me 1 second. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Dabiri. You have the ability to unmute.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, Commissioners. My name is Puya. I'm the store director here at the Hollister Target. And to answer the question, yes, if that is something we would see in our parking lots, our assets protection team would let the people there know that isn't allowed and ask them to leave at that point. And obviously, if they do not, we would escalate to law enforcement. The one thing I would add is that our assets protection team regularly throughout the day does do parking lot patrols throughout the day and the evening. So if that's something they would come across, they would make sure to address.
Have you had any issues with shoplifting of beer or wine?
Yeah, shoplifting has been something that has come up, much like any other retail store. Fortunately, our Target, relative to other Targets in the vicinity, doesn't have that level of shoplifting in spirits or the alcohol aisle or anywhere across the store relative to other buildings. So while that is a concern, that is something that our assets protection team would handle.
And I just had one last question. If somebody was overly intoxicated and tried to buy alcohol, do you guys refuse sales?
On that note, I would have to partner up, given that we haven't rolled this out yet in our store. I would partner up. One thing we do have in the building is obviously, any disruptive guests in the store. We do ask them to leave the building if they're causing disruption to our guests or the safety of any team member or guest in the store. So if that were something that would come across, we would ask them to leave the building, and that would prevent them from checking out.
Any more questions for the speaker?
I do have one. Will you be using any type of modified security devices on the shelving units when the alcohol will be stored? And will it be still stored in the far back corner, or will you move it to a more centralized location for better visibility for staff?
Yeah, so currently that aisle where the alcohol is in the general vicinity where the spirits will be. We do have camera locations in those aisles that continuously monitor those aisles. In addition, typically what Target does is they have the moisture protection guidelines around the alcohol. So in our district, for instance, we do have hard bottle caps that we put on the merchandise before they go out to their shelves, in addition to a spider wrap strategy to maintain that product and ensure that it isn't easily stolen and whatnot.
Okay, any further questions for the speaker? Okay, next speaker, please.
Okay. I have no more speakers for this item.
Okay, we'll close the public comment at 6:33. What is the pleasure of the commission?
Mr. Chair, I think that the applicant has answered some of the questions and concerns that I also had about security and monitoring the activity around the liquor sales. I think that geographically, it does make sense to have a one-shop experience. In a way, it does lower the carbon footprint to a certain extent. I would like to make a resolution number on this.
This will be resolution 2023-4.
I'd like to make a resolution to approve PC Resolution 2023-4 and adopt CUP number 2022-4 to recommend that we move this to the City Council for approval.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Huboy,
Yes.
Chair Henderson,
Yes.
Commissioner Corona,
Yes.
Commissioner Belong,
Yes.
Commissioner Lenore.
Aye.
Thank you. We will move on to new business, item one.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, there's another resolution,
I apologize.
associated with this item, to make a motion to recommend that the public necessity is served by the Type 21 ABC license to be also, is that also to be subject to approval by the City Council?
Yes, that one's for the
Okay.
City Council.
That's my motion.
Resolution 2023-5.
PC resolution, thank you. And it's good to have you back on. Commissioner Lenore. 2023-5 is a PC resolution
Second.
to approve.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Huboy,
Yes.
Chair Henderson,
Yes.
Commissioner Corona,
Yes.
Commissioner Belong,
Yes.
Commissioner Lenore.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, thank you. I think we're ready to move on to new business, item 1. Occupancy agreement between the City of Hollister and Prakash Patel / Hollister Gateway Hotel LP. Staff report, please.
Okay, this will also be Liz Gagliardi.
Okay, moving on to new business item 1. This will be for an occupancy agreement between the City of Hollister and Prakash Patel, and the City of Hollister, Hollister Gateway Hotel LP. That is the applicant. So this project is located off of Gateway Drive across the street from the new Fairfield Hotel on the north side of town, as shown here on the screen. Here's a rendering of the hotel. And for some background on this item, back in October of 2019, the Planning Commission approved Site and Architectural Review 2019-16 and Conditional Use Permit 2019-6 for the construction of a 4-story, 93-room Holiday Inn hotel. The construction of the hotel has largely been completed, and they were issued a temporary certificate of occupancy in November of this past year, 2022. At this point, the owner is seeking a final certificate of occupancy from our building department, which is normally not something that the Planning Commission would be involved in, but given the conditions of approval, we have it here before you tonight. I will just point out that the reason they have been unable to fulfill their conditions of approval is because asphalt plants are closed during the winter. So this has prevented them from fulfilling their one last condition of approval for this project. And that outstanding condition of approval is before you here, condition number 16 on their original approval. And this requires the property owner or developer to replace any street or sidewalk improvements or utility services that are either removed or damaged during the construction of the project as determined by the city engineer. And this could include, but is not limited to, any permeable paving, PCC curbs, gutters, sidewalks, street lighting, signage, and striping, all of the underground utilities, including but not limited to sanitary sewer, gas, electrical, telephone, water and fire service lines, and all of the other improvements to bring the right-of-way into full compliance with applicable city standards. All of this construction in the right-of-way shall be completed prior to the final building approval. And as I mentioned before, due to the closure of asphalt plants during the winter, they have not been able to fulfill that final condition of approval. So the applicant is seeking to enter into an occupancy agreement. Typically, this is something that the city would be able to do at the discretion of the director. But as the conditions were written in 2019, they do not allow the city to accept a cash bond to ensure the completion of conditions of approval. So the property owner is seeking to enter into an occupancy agreement with the city in order to allow them to receive that final certificate of occupancy before the condition number 16 is completed. So this agreement would require that the owner provide a security deposit to the city in the amount of $105,644.36. That is the cost associated with the improvements that are required. And based on this agreement, the owner must complete the required work within 6 months in order to get that deposit returned to them. If they fail to complete that work within 6 months, the city can use these funds from their security deposit to complete those outstanding improvements. And a copy of the agreement was included in your staff report for more details on that. There are 3 options before the Planning Commission tonight. The first is to adopt a resolution to approve the execution of an occupancy permit agreement by and between the City of Hollister and Hollister Gateway Hotel, LP, and to delegate the authority to the city manager to execute that agreement. The second option would be to deny the proposed project. And the third option would be to continue the public hearing and direct staff to provide additional information or clarification. And staff recommends that the Planning Commission select option 1. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Thank you. Any questions for staff?
I do have one. The 6-month timeline that starts as of today.
I would defer to our city attorney who's prepared the agreement.
You know, I don't recall the exact language in the agreement. It may be from the date that it's actually signed, which would be, within the next couple of days, or it may be from today. I don't recall, but approximately 6 months from now.
Any further questions?
I have a comment,
Okay.
and maybe a question. I've never heard of the delay reason, asphalt. Again, what is it? What's the issue? The cold weather?
My understanding is that the plant that supplies them with what they need to do that work is closed for the winter.
Well, okay, because we do a lot of improvements on our city streets, and we lay asphalt down. Where's that coming from? And I have another question for Christian.
Good evening, Commissioners. Christian Bulis, Associate Engineer. To answer your question, in this case, it's not asphalt. It's actually a Type 2 slurry seal. So it's the coating that you put on top of the roads. Unfortunately, during November and late March, April, that's when they shut down. It's not the same as regular asphalt, which you could do during the winter. This is a different type of material. Correct.
May I ask one more question of Christian?
Yes, please.
Is the 105,000 absolutely adequate for the improvements?
Yes.
It has to be covering all of it. Don't want to hear later they came up short. Seems like that's a lot of work for 105,000.
So their engineer's estimate was actually half of the 105.
Okay.
They have received bids from different contractors. For us, in order to do the work, we have to take into account prevailing wages, a 10% contingency. So all that was taken into account, and that's how we came up with the 105.
So city staff is confident that's going to cover all the improvements?
Correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair. Christian, I was reading in the staff report that there was an issue with restriping or removing striping. Was that correct? Or damage done during construction?
So typically during construction, there is obviously damages to the streets, the sidewalks, which is typical. You see that with residential, commercial. In this case, what they will require to do will be to remove the existing striping in order for them to be able to slurry seal the road. So as part of the engineer's estimate, they have to remove the striping, they have to slurry seal the roads, and then restripe it as well.
So the striping was done prematurely then, is that correct?
So the striping was existing.
Oh, striping was existing?
Correct.
Oh, existing before the construction?
Correct.
Oh, okay. Just wanted to make clear on that. Anything else other than, so I guess they issued a temporary occupancy because all the health and safety issues were pretty much taken care of after the construction. The inspectors approved that and granted a temporary occupancy. So the remaining work is not, does not pertain to health or safety issues. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, any more?
I have another question. Since you're gonna bring that up. The sidewalk, so there's no danger to the pedestrians entering and leaving the facility?
Yes, so we assess the site just to make sure that there's no tripping hazards. Mainly what you see out there is just a little bit of cracking from vehicles driving over the sidewalks. So it's not going to be a concern for the safety of the public.
Because it is a city sidewalk,
Correct.
and we're okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Oops, I forgot to turn that on.
Okay. Any more questions for staff? Okay. Hearing no other questions, we will move on to the public input at 6:45. Any speakers?
I have no speaker cards for this item. Would you like to speak? Okay, go ahead. This is the applicant.
Yeah, my name is Prakash Patel. I'm sorry it got late, but it took me an hour and 40 minutes to come here, so I didn't expect that. So, but yeah, I think we have, this striping really came at the last minute, otherwise we could have done it earlier. So our slurry, we had been asking for a long time, but trying to get the final occupancy, but it came at the last minute, and we've been negotiating what to do and not to do for the last 3 months. But finally, because of our bank, the loan conditions, we need to get this done, and that's why we agreed to give the deposit. Even though I really don't agree with everything there, it's on the agreement. Thanks. If you have any other questions, let me know.
Thanks. Were there any questions for the applicant?
Does the owner have a company ready to do the work or a time frame?
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, we have the contractor. He's a local general contractor here who does mostly off-site work. So he did the rest of the work. In fact, he did the underground work on the street itself and on the site. So it's a local contractor who can do it. But as I said, the slurry is a special material which you can't get it today.
Did he give you a time frame of when you're going to get it?
We have signed the contract with him, so as soon as the plant is open, he'll do it.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other speakers?
I have no other speakers.
Thank you. We'll close the public comment at 6:47. Any more discussion from the commission? Okay. Is there a motion?
I move that we adopt resolution 2023-6, approving the execution of an occupancy permit agreement between the City of Hollister and Hollister Gateway Hotel, and delegate the authority to the city manager to execute the agreement.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Huboy?
Yes.
Chair Henderson?
Yes.
Commissioner Corona?
Yes.
Commissioner Belong?
Yes.
Commissioner Lenore?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. We will
Good luck.
move on to old business.
I have no old business.
Okay, we will move on to, how long will the study session items be?
They are just discussion items, so it kind of depends on your questions and the discussion that we have. So
Okay.
Sorry.
I'll ask my commissioners, do they need or would you like a recess? Okay, we will move on to, yeah. We will move on to study session items, starting with item 1, zoning ordinance overhaul.
So the purpose of this study session is to assist or help us in the, can you hear me now? Is to assist us in our overhaul of the zoning ordinance. So as part of phase 2, we're going to amend all the sections within chapter 17.24. And the sections in those chapter is our permitting process. It outlines what is site and architectural review, what is plan development, what is a conditional use permit. So all those sections are within that. That's part of phase 2B that we're going to start working on now, that we're almost done with phase 1. And we thought before we really get into that, it would be helpful for us to have a discussion with you to kind of lay out how we review projects that come into this city, what our path from submittal to hopefully approval is, so that you can have this knowledge in the back of your head when we get to those other sections. Thank you. So Eva's going to hand you a very large blow-up version of what you see on your screen, because I certainly can't read that, so I don't want anyone to lose their vision. So one of the major things that the city is up against when an application comes in that is not a legislative act, so a general plan amendment or a rezone's a little bit different, but for everything else, the city needs to comply with the Permit Streamlining Act. And what the Permit Streamlining Act is a set of rules for how long we have to review a project. So upon initial submittal, so you can see that first step, we have 30 days once we accept an application to provide an exhaustive list of all of the items that we need in order to deem the application complete. So, if the application was missing some of the required information in our submittal list, we have to send a letter and we have to list everything that is missing in that letter. So that's part of the Permit Streamlining Act. When it gets resubmitted, we again have 30 days. It's only allowed to be with us for 30 days. Once it's, if for some reason we got an application and we didn't act within the 30 days, the project is complete. Once we do determine that an application is complete, now we get into SEQA review. So we have 30 days to determine from date of completeness if further review under SEQA is required. So within 30 days, I have to determine, is a negative declaration required? Are we required to do an EIR? Following that determination, there are different timeline or different periods that we have to finish that process so that we can't take too long. So it's 180 days for a mitigated or a negative declaration, and it's 1 year for an EIR. That takes much more time. Once we've hit all these time frames, we have a specific deadlines for approval of the project, and it's based on, again, that level of environmental review. So Permit Streamlining Act really is to ensure that cities do not sit on applications for a significant amount of time, so that applicants are unaware of what's going on in the process. Why is my delays, things that we don't have in Hollister, but in some other cities, they do. So
The other bigger handout you have is a list what happens when a project is submitted. And this will be up here, but I'm mainly just gonna talk about what we're looking at, some of the things that happen to us when we get projects, and feel free to interrupt, ask questions throughout the process. So the initial submittal comes into a city for a development application. They come to the counter, they pay their fee, they have to give us their application materials. All of that information has to be with them when they come in to apply. Once they apply, it then gets assigned to a planner and it gets routed to the city's development review committee. The development review committee is made up of various departments and outside agencies. So for example, the health department, fire department, engineering, Recology, our waste provider, the school district gets notified. This whole group of people gets notified of the project. Now, they have submitted, so we have 30 days. So, as part of this review for planning, from planning's perspective, is we have to look to see, did they give us all the information that we need? The city has a submittal checklist on our website. So it's available to everyone on the website, or they can email us or call us and we can get it to them.
Excuse me, can I just jump in here? 'Cause so the 30 days after the application, you receive the application, you have 30 days to review for completeness. How does the DRC review come into that 30-day period? Is that part of the 30 days, or is that a
Yes.
totally separate?
That is part of the 30 days.
That is part of the 30 days, okay.
So from the planning perspective, now let's say it's my project, I have the project. I have to make sure, did they give us everything? For example, do I have a colored elevation? Do I have your color materials board? Do I have a landscape plan? You know, we're looking for all of those components that we need to actually finish our review.
Right. So the 30 days includes looking for all the, make sure that you have all the completeness for the elevations, colored elevation, whatever. And then also the 30 days, you would expect DRC comments, is that correct?
Yes, so
Okay.
what happens, let's say day 29, you, the applicant, will get a letter from us. And in that letter, you will have all your items that you need for completeness. And to the extent that we are able, comments on your design. And I'll get back to that one in a second. But your letter lists all these things that we still need. For example, you didn't give me your landscape plan. I need your stormwater information. I don't have your title report, whatever it is. And that's coming from all the departments within the city. For example, Recology could say, I need my Recology form filled out. You didn't include that in your application. So it all gets compiled in one letter. So they're not receiving 20 letters from 20 departments. It's all one letter with every item that we need to make your project complete. What we also try to do, although not required within the 30 days, we also try to give comments on your project. Your streets are too narrow. Where's your sidewalks? We don't like the fact that you are trying to paint a building pink. Whatever it is, that we try to get within that letter. And the reason I say we try is because if you are missing something very important, if you are missing the colors on your building, if you're missing the elevations, if you're missing a landscape plan, I can only comment on what I have in front of me, so they are just the comments that I can give you at that time. So then that letter goes off to the applicant has it, hopefully they use it as a checklist, make sure that their plans now address all this information we've asked for, and then they're gonna resubmit. That length of time is up to them. I have applicants that will resubmit within a very extensive list in 3 weeks. I have applicants that have 2 items and it takes them 7 months. I have no control over that. That portion, once that 30 days is over and I've sent the letter out, I have no more control of your project till you resubmit. Now you can call me, you can ask questions, I'll help you work through your project, but I can't shorten that period down. I have no control over their project at that point. It's really up to them, and every applicant is different. When the second submittal comes in, it gets route it again to DRC, because for the most part, after that first submittal, there's comments from usually every department. So we're gonna make sure that now, fire had some comments, they get to look at it again, engineering gets to look at it again, everyone who had comments gets to look at it again. If they've changed their project, sometimes that happens, we're gonna make sure everyone gets to see it again. So it goes out again, we have another 30 days. The hope would be at this point that you followed all of our comments, you reached out to staff, we've all worked everything, we've worked it all out, and you will be complete at this point. Unfortunately, that is usually not the case. For whatever reason, you miss a submittal requirement, or 2 or 3 or 4, or, like a landscape, you didn't give me the landscape plan before, I couldn't, evaluate that. Now that you've given it to me, oh, now I have a landscape plan, but you didn't tell me what species you're planting or what size your plants are. So we have another issue at that point. So that phase again is 30 days. And again, depending on how that review went, it goes back to the applicant again. And we can keep going back and forth until we have finished this completeness review. And I'm just talking about completeness items. So everything on that checklist that we ask you to give us. So if you've hit everything within that checklist, I don't know how many times it's going to take you. If you give it all to us, now we have a complete package. I can fully review your application to the degree that we need to. Again, after these phases in between, we don't have any control over it. I can't hurry them up. Some applicants take a really long time. Some are fast. It's dependent on a number of factors that we have no control over. If the application is complete, let's say we have an application, you've done all of our submittal requirements, I have all the plans I need, but we have some outstanding issues. We are going to give you a letter, and we are going to try to get that worked out before we come to Planning Commission, because it's beneficial for all parties involved if we can work it out. If we have an issue because you don't meet the requirements of the percentage of landscaping that you're required to have, we'd rather get that worked out at staff level rather than coming here and now we have to recommend denial because you don't meet the landscaping requirements or you don't meet the setbacks. We don't want to come here and say, well, we'd like you to deny this project because they don't meet the setbacks in the code. We'd rather work that out. Now, in some cases, we can't. In some cases, it doesn't matter what we say. It doesn't matter what the code says. They want to come forward. And so if we hit that point, we will bring them forward for you to review. In some cases, that design phase goes back in, like where you're complete, but we have design comments. We will bounce back and forth with them, trying to work it out to get them to comply with the code. An example would be KB with their cluster lots that we looked at a couple months ago. They were complete, or they weren't complete, but we just wanted to bring them forward with a plan development so we could approve those setbacks that didn't meet the code. And they didn't want to apply for that. So we bounced back and forth 4 months until we finally came before the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission told them they had to have a plan development. They essentially wasted 6 months of their own time because ultimately it was approved with a plan development that we had been asking for numerous times. Once a project is complete, we have to determine if further environmental review is done under CEQA. Some projects, we can tell right from the beginning that yes, CEQA is required. If you do not qualify for any exemptions, you are a very large parcel, no prior work was done, that's automatic. We pretty much know the second you apply. Some, though, we don't know until you're complete. For example, if we have a project and they don't meet the density either over or under, they're technically not within the general plan. And so if we can't work it out and they say, we just want to file for a general plan amendment, the general plan amendment at that point triggers CEQA. We couldn't work it out, further down, now we know CEQA is required. If they, in whatever way, do not comply with the zoning ordinance, that too can trigger CEQA, and we just won't know until we get further down the road. They could have maybe technically been exempt in the beginning. Now we see you don't comply with the zoning ordinance, you lose that exemption. So that's where we kind of don't know until the end. It's in our best interest to kind of get it moving forward earlier if we can, because the time that it takes to write CEQA documents is a very long, and we don't want that to hold up the project, so we like to start it earlier. That just makes it better for all of us. So I don't have a project that we're just waiting on a mitigated neg deck to finish so we can, take it forward. We'd rather get it done sooner rather than later. Once we've made that CEQA determination, the CEQA if it's required, the CEQA document gets finished. It goes out, if it needs to, it goes out for public review. CEQA has different review times. And then, once that's all done, then we hopefully come to the Planning Commission. At the Planning Commission meeting, obviously you have a staff report, you have a resolution, hopefully saying approval, and conditions of approval. Those conditions of approval are slowly given to staff from all the departments within the city as they've reviewed the project. So engineering's reviewed a project, they're gonna give us, once they're ready, their review is complete, they're gonna give us the conditions of approval for that project. Same with fire and various other departments, and then planning has our own as well, which you can see we have it broken down in the resolution with the conditions of approval where you can see which department they're coming from. So the DRC is looking at the project, they're giving comments on completeness, comments on design, and when they feel comfortable, that department is putting in place conditions of approval to cover that specific project. In some cases, there are specific conditions of approval where a department is saying, I'm okay with it if they do whatever it is. If they widen the sidewalk by whatever it is, but their recommendation based on their experience is included in that condition of approval. Same with planning. If there is something with the plans that maybe is minor, we would include it as a condition of approval rather than just making them fix their plans and resubmitting. So an example would be on a couple of mine, you saw where I said you need 2 more trees to meet code. They still have to submit final landscaping plans later. 2 trees adding on later is not that hard for them to add as they have to do their final landscape plans. But I don't want to make them waste their time for this phase if that's the only issue remaining. It's fair if we allow them to move forward. In some cases, we might have conditions of approval based on some operation type thing. So a good example would be a conditional use permit if you want to have a use of some sort and we want to make sure that you're not impacting a business. We could add some sort of condition of approval saying, your hours are limited to X, Y, Z, or if there was a parking issue, you may only have so many employees or so many customers. So those are things that are included in that. If we got to the point where we could not recommend approval of a project for any reason, then the resolution put forward by staff is a resolution for denial. And in that resolution for denial, within the findings is the reasons why the staff feels the project should be denied. So one reason could be if the code requires someone to have 100 parking spaces and they're only going to provide 80, they don't meet the code. So the denial resolution would be centered around what is this project either deficient or lacking that is inconsistent with either the general plan or the zoning ordinance. And in some cases, it could be inconsistent with the environmental review that may have already been previously adopted for the site. That's more of a rare one, but it could happen. But in that denial resolution, we list the reasons for the basis for denial. Same with an approval resolution, we're listing all the ways in which the project should be approved. We would say, they have enough trees, they meet the land use designation, and this is why. They meet the zoning ordinance, they meet their zoning designation, this is why. They meet these setbacks, they meet this lot coverage. The resolutions provide several things for us. One is, it's the legal basis for why you either approved or denied a project. And if the project goes up on appeal, those reasons are in there. The second is, for staff or someone down the road, if we couldn't figure out, we look open, someone comes to us and they say, I got this project approved and we built it and now I want to do this and that. And we look at their plans and we're like, what happened here? Like, why did we approve this project? The resolution should really lay out for a planner where I can go, oh, that's why. The setback at the time was only 5 feet. 4 years later, we happened to change it to 8 feet, but this is clearly telling me, what it was. Maybe the parking requirements change over time, and that parking requirement is listed in there. They have enough parking. They had to have 1 to 200, so they have enough. But now the city requires 1 to 400. I can kind of figure out what path we took to approve that project. It's a lot easier for us if we have that kind of basis for us. So that's why those findings are important to both the legal record and to staff in the future. So in your staff report, I took a sample, gave you a sample review of 2300 Burt, and that was a project that you recently approved. It's on the last page if you want to look at it. But 2300 Burt was an example of very fast resubmittals. So they submitted in February of 22, and they were approved and done by August 25th, and they're fast for some of our applicants. So, they submitted, we sent them comments within 30 days. They did take 64 days to respond to our comments. They had quite an extensive list. They were missing a lot of items that we needed. And then they resubmitted with 30 days. We sent them back another letter. They got almost all of our comments. They did it, almost all of them. There was a few minor comments, and they fixed them, and 18 days later, they submitted their plans, and they were ready to go. Now, noticing in this city takes a little bit long, so they were deemed complete on July 26th, but because we only meet with the Planning Commission once a month for projects, obviously then they had to wait a month, like almost a month to get approval. But that is a very fast turnaround by an applicant. I have an applicant right now who got 2 comments on his first submittal, and it took him 6 months to resubmit, and he only gave me 1 of the 2 items I asked for. So, and he's incomplete again. So it really is who you hire, who you're working with, what their timeline is. Their architects could be busy and can't get to these items if they're, too busy. So, I personally like faster reviews because then we can move on to other things, and so we don't have too many projects going at once, but I have no control over applicants. So that is our process in a nutshell. If you have any more questions on this one, I'd be happy to answer them.
I do have a question. Forgive me if you already mentioned it, but after the application is deemed complete, all the comments from DRC have been responded to. How long do the departments have to complete their conditions of approval?
So the way that it works here, and cities are very different, but the way that it works here is within that review period, we give every department a deadline. So we say, we need your comments or your conditions of approval by, and that date is set up. So if you are giving me completeness issues, I have enough time to get them in that letter and get it off in that deadline. Or if you're just giving me your conditions of approval, I can attach them to that letter. So I can say, Fire has no comments, but they've included these conditions of approval on your project if you want to take a look at them now in case there's no questions later. So there's no questions later. But it's in 30 days in this city, within.
So they're given 30 days, the departments then?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, not really 30, because we have to be out in 30, so we're like 20, 25.
Okay. Less than 30.
There's a drop dead timeline for projects that are moving along that could get automatically approved.
So the approval process under the Permit Streamlining Act, and Jennifer can correct me if I'm wrong, but What happens is if the project is deemed complete and and there's no CEQA involved, because if CEQA is involved, you have to wait. You don't really have a choice on that. I believe that there is 60 days, and if we do not notice you, the applicant can do the notice for you and take you to hearing. Is that
Okay.
correct, Jennifer?
Yes, but that would be unlikely.
Yeah.
That's
And-
never happened.
Right, and I think because, there is this iterative process that Erica talked about where, they're starting with whether or not the application is even complete, and so.
But I know there's a deadline.
There is,
Right.
that's correct,
'Cause,
yes.
yeah, I don't remember how long it is, but if you do not.
Yeah, for automatic approval. yeah.
Right.
No, you're correct about that. I just think what I mean by unlikely is that I think staff's so aware of that deadline.
Yeah,
that they
it
adhere to
might have
it.
come close to happening just a couple of times in the decades that I was doing it, but there is something in there. You
Yeah,
really
yeah,
got to
there
pay
is.
attention
So
to
there's
everything.
incentive to stick with the 30 days.
I think I got a good grasp on the process since I did it for a very long time, and I probably did hundreds of DRC packets and agendas. So thank you. I want to thank you for that presentation.
So hopefully as we move on, it's going to get quite technical and complicated. And this is we want to give you a little bit of background so you know kind of how we're reviewing a project while we're discussing how we're going to amend the zoning ordinance to make the process a little bit easier on people and for the zoning ordinance to be more clear.
I like that we're back to saying zoning ordinance. It was always the zoning ordinance, and then they're like, development code. I'm like, what? Development code. So then I got used to saying development code, and now I see you're back to zoning ordinance, which I like. 'Cause to me, it's a zoning ordinance. Yeah, so that's kind of a blast from the past.
Nothing else?
I think this is very helpful, and also to have this all consolidated in one letter form instead of having piecemealed at a time is really, really, I think, really helpful to the applicant. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, we've really been working, and with Four Leaf coming on board and having more staff, we've been working to try and have really complete letters and get as many design comments as we can upfront initially so that those can be addressed while we're still in this completeness process. Because as Commissioner Lenore mentioned, once you're complete, then you're looking at some timeframes for determining on a CEQA, and then once CEQA is done, that's when that approval timeframe kicks in, is once you know which CEQA level. Yeah, so we're trying to they get long. They're like sometimes 10, 15-page letters, but trying to make sure that we're being as helpful and thorough to our applicants as we can.
Maybe if you get those ones that are just stubborn, don't want to do it, and you go back and forth, if it's helpful, maybe I might recommend that you bring it on to the Planning Commission so that we could give them that extra voice that says they need to do it. It might shorten it up a little, because, yeah, I like to see projects running through fast. So if that helps any, and you can cut down the back and forth, and they need to hear it from the Planning Commission, you might want to think about bringing it a little sooner. We could partner up and say, no, as staff's recommending that, it's part of the zoning, it's part of the general plan. If they need to hear from us, then we could let them know.
We can definitely do that.
Just a suggestion. I mean, I know we want things complete, and it's, so I'm just saying, if you get the one that has to hear it from someone else, then maybe you want to bring it, and then they're gonna get it done. Okay.
All right. Are we complete with item 1?
I think so.
We are. I did have someone from the public who would like to speak on both items if the Planning Commission would like to allow that. It's not a formal public hearing. I would defer to Jennifer and the commission.
Yeah, you should still require or allow public comment, although it's not a public hearing, but just people might have something to say.
Okay. So we'll open public comment at 7:17.
Okay. Jeffrey Small.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Chairman, Commissioners, and a non-consecutive Planning Commissioner. Congratulations,
Yes.
Commissioner Lenore. Good.
This was always my passion.
Yeah. New Planning Director, Christine. I'm not sure if now is the best time or maybe after the second item, but for those of you who don't know me, my name is Jeffrey Small. I'm a financial advisor, and I'm here representing the San Benito High School District. And wanted to let you know that we are involved as one of your entities in participating in the DRC and hearing about the new projects, and also just trying to meet with the applicants and work with them in a cooperative way. As you know, the Hollister High School, it's operating at overcapacity, and we're working very closely with the community on the educational program for a second high school, the cost of a second high school, the funding of the second high school. And we are getting, I think, really great feedback. The district has a facilities needs committee. We meet every month. There could be anywhere from 50 to 60 people from the community participating in that. So it's really nice to have that community engagement. We were very active in the general plan process, submitted some proposals that are supportive to the extent legally permissible of schools, and also working very closely on a regular basis with your planning department, with county RMA, and others too, including the development community, including the BIA. We recognize that at the end of the day, it's really one community. There's been one high school for 125 years, and there has been, of course, a lot of growth. And I guess what I'd like to say to you is we look forward to working closely with you, continuing our close relationship with the planning department, and really ask, our really ask is that when land use actions come before you, that you consider the impact that those have on the high school, and know that we are here to engage in exploring, how things are funded, what our point of view is. But the main thing that we're concerned about is maintaining the current level of education in the community. And with that, I thank you very much for the time you extended me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other speakers?
Let me just double check that no one else has joined us online. No, I have no more speakers.
Okay, we'll close the public comment at 7:21. We'll move on to study session item 2.
So for this section of our study session, staff would like to discuss with you some potential changes to the plan development section of the zoning ordinance. That section is 17.24.240. And I'm going to give a little presentation, but we actually have very direct questions for you tonight. So then at the end, I kind of need you to answer all of them. And what I'm going to do is, after this discussion, I will know how to approach the amending this chapter. I just need some direction from you before we, start it, so I can see what you would like, what direction you'd like to head in, and then I can start writing it. So as far as the existing section is concerned, it does need to be completely rewritten, and we've already identified the rewriting of the entire zoning ordinance as part of the zoning ordinance overhaul. The existing section is very confusing, and plan developments are actually technically only allowed for specific projects that we do not even follow. There's a list of what we're supposed to be requiring, and that has not been followed, and we've just been allowing them. And it does conflict with other sections of the zoning ordinance. So there is a conflict between that and some other areas. So we need to fix all of that. So in Hollister, the way that we approve plan developments right now is we approve a plan development with a conditional use permit. A conditional use permit is typically intended to provide relief from the strict application of the zoning ordinance with regards to uses. So what I mean by that is The zoning ordinance very specifically establishes permitted uses by zoning district. So there are limited things that you can do on your property, and that's just by right. So single-family residential dwelling, obviously you can't operate a restaurant. So the zoning ordinance lists all those permitted uses. Then what we have is what we call conditional uses. And those are uses that, while we think they might be okay, we're not sure if they are something we should permit by right. So for example, in the light industrial zoning district, we do allow like an outdoor sports center, for lack of a better word, where it's a conditional use permit and maybe like a mini golf. So could a mini golf be okay in that area? Maybe. You know, you need a large space for mini golf. You don't want it next to some single family residential dwellings because of noise. They probably have like maybe a go-kart track with it. Those are things that we think might be okay, but we really want to look at your project. What are the impacts? What are the impacts to surrounding uses? Do you have parking? What's noise like? That's what a conditional use permit is typically used for. With that conditional use permit and the code, you can revoke a conditional use permit. So if you get a conditional use permit, let's say to operate a karate studio, and you're only allowed to have 20 people because you only have limited parking, and we notice you have 100 people in there all days and all hours, and you're taking over all the parking, and you're parking in the neighbor's parking lot because you don't have enough parking, we can bring proceedings to revoke your permit, and then you're not allowed to operate. That is what conditional use permits are typically required for. So with that in mind, and the way the conditional use permit section is established in our zoning ordinance, which again, it just discusses uses, approving a planned development with a conditional use permit is not really consistent with that section of the code. What I like to do whenever I'm thinking about amending the code, or if a planning commissioner came to me and said, you know, I think we should amend the zoning ordinance, we should require a 40-foot front yard setback for all single-family residential. I like to see what other jurisdictions are doing. Are we off base? Are we nowhere near what other people are doing? Also, what are people doing? Because I'd like to see what they're doing. Maybe they do it in an interesting manner that we'd like to follow. So what I did is I went and looked at 22 jurisdictions around us. How do they do planned developments? And they, for the most part, all require a planned development as a rezone. So they are rezoning the property to planned development. So whatever it was before, let's say it's single family R1, and they would have to rezone it to planned development. One city that I found does require a conditional use permit, and that's Fresno. Every city, though, regulates or allows planned developments in a different way. For example, Paso Robles only allows it for properties which are 25% affordable or protect a natural feature with a minimum open space. They have very strict requirements on what they allow for a planned development. King City requires a specific plan if they want a planned development. Specific plan is a planning document, establishes uses and a number of things. It's a very big planning document, but they require that. And then they all vary on how they designate it on the zoning map. Some just designate it as planned development. Some do a combining district. So if you were light industrial, you'd be PD/M1. One city, Fremont, just zones it to P. So that portion is, they're all over the place. Some cities only allow it for residential. Some cities allow for more than residential. They allow a planned development for commercial or industrial.
Is there any reason why San Jose is on there twice?
Oh, no, it's just an accident.
We-
Good catch, though.
We currently do PDs for light industrial.
Here?
Yeah,
we've issued some CUPs for plan developments for lots of projects.
Where it's,
Well, the air park, I think, was a PD.
Also, for mixed-use zones, we allow PDs.
the code does not.
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to fix.
Okay. One question I have for the 22 that you researched, that for PDs, they have rezones. Sometimes you have a plan development which would have a variation of setbacks or parking, but not necessarily use. Do these rezones, is it the use involved, or is it, I mean, if I have a plan development where I'm proposing that I have a setback variance, and then maybe I can't quite meet the parking requirement, would that necessitate a rezone?
So parking is a different situation. If you don't meet the parking in our code, there's a different process that we have to follow.
Okay.
We could decide if we wanted to include that as a plan development, but as far as parking goes, if you can't meet the parking, we want to have a parking analysis done. So parking's like a different situation, but let's say you are a single-family residential developer and you know that we only allow it for setbacks right now, but let's say, I don't know, I'm in San Jose or something, and I am a developer and I want a different kind of setback, and I want a different lot coverage. So maybe I want to go to 60, maybe I want a 20-foot to garage and a 10-foot to the house for the front.
Right.
So you would give us the documentation for what is it that you want this plan development to be, and then within your ordinance that we are writing, we establish the rules for your property now, and then, because in most cases, things change over time, there might be something you didn't think about, we're gonna refer back to some zoning regulations that more closely follow your property. So if you were a single family, we'd probably fall back to the R1, and then that would be any uses that we start allowing in an R1, SB9, for example. That way we know where to fall back to if things change, if there's any questions later on, maybe it wasn't written very well, so we know where to go from there. Same with if we approved it for, let's say, a shopping center, that plan development is gonna list every use that's allowed there, if that's what they were doing, maybe they wanted a different mix of uses. It's gonna list those mix of uses, and then we want it to fall back.
Yes, my point is that if the plan development is just for a variation for like a setback or a height, but has nothing to do with the use is still consistent with the land use designation, would that necessitate a rezone? Because
In every
it
city
seems to me that a rezone would be appropriate if there was a different use.
So
or other than the conditional use.
I
You
see
see
what
my
you're
point?
saying. In every city, if you are asking just for a reduced side yard setback 1, you're a rezone. And these 22,
Because-
except for Fresno.
Rezones have to go back to the city council.
Rezones, yes. If it's we're kind of getting ahead, but if it's a
Yeah,
rezone,
I'm jumping ahead, sorry.
you would make the recommendation to the city council.
Right.
But if you look at this chart, all of our surrounding jurisdictions, the developers follow that process, the rezone process in all those jurisdictions.
And they have to rezone even if it's just a setback or some kind of,
Yes.
other than a use.
And I would add something too. A lot of cities, these same ones, also have a different process for potentially like an exception or a variance. So if it was just a setback and there was some qualifying variance reason or something like that, it wouldn't necessitate a plan development.
Right, and
yeah.
that's what I'm kind of going towards.
That's a little different.
Yeah, and it's a little
Because-
different, but one thing, if you'll recall, when we were talking, I think last year in December with the site and architectural review, kind of minor change, was that we had recommended findings for plan development, and plan development is usually they're offering some kind of enhanced architecture or maybe art or more open space. So there's kind of a give and take, whereas an exception for a setback might be a little bit different. It might be more of this is why we need this setback, and they're not really trying to do a whole plan development. In a lot of these cities where it is a rezone, it is more complicated. They want big asks, big setback differences, or maybe different density or a different type of product, or there's usually a lot to these, which is also why they become a rezone. But
Yeah, because
we do it
I'd like
different.
to see if an applicant is relatively some flexibility with setbacks or parking, that to go through a rezone, have it go back to the city council, I think is just a little excessive. But I know I'm going
again,
forward here.
Parking is so different, and the way in which we can review it and the options for them are so varied. I wouldn't say if someone came to us tomorrow and was like, I want some different parking, we wouldn't be like, oh, you need a plan development. For the most part, you know, you always get those very interesting projects. So I would say for the most part, the purpose of a plan development is the city has established setbacks. We have established setbacks, and they were established for a reason. And for the most part, you can meet those setbacks. The purpose of a plan development is supposed to be centered around you are trying to do something so unique that if I strictly apply the zoning ordinance, that your project can't be built. So let's say I want to do some sort of clustered development where I'm doing a bunch of single-family residential dwellings, and I'm going to put them all together, but then they're surrounded by this great green space. But technically, they can't meet our required setbacks. You know, that's an interesting design. Why would, you know, if it looks interesting and provides this like unique housing development type, why wouldn't we want to approve it? But our zoning ordinance, if we strictly applied it, would say no. So we say, hey, here's the process. We think this is a great idea. We'd like to, you know, have this in our city. It's very unique. We'd like to do it. Just to say, I want, you know, a 10-foot rear yard setback because I want it is not really the purpose of a plan development.
Right, usually if a setback variance, it's based on, it would be, a variance to a setback is subject to a situation where there's site peculiarities, something that's forced issue that could have findings. So I'm just trying to kind of get setbacks and heights, stuff like, if there's something that is a forced issue that there's no way around it, you have findings based on some confines of the site or whatever, that would be a variance.
That would be more of a variance if you have like, kind of like irregularly shaped parcels or
And that's
a hill
more, that's
for,
more,
let's say for some reason, the city approved a tentative map 100 years ago, and we approved these like little teeny tiny lots that we would preclude anyone from building on, but we don't want to do that. You know, that's like a variation situation. There's a number of things that would go into a variance.
right, a variance, but plan development is kind of a creative, you're doing something creative, there's some affordability component to it,
Maybe,
a lot of
but
times.
not required.
Not required.
Unless we require it, that's within your purview, but, not all cities require an affordable component as part of a plan development. That's only I think only Paso was one that I found. That was the only one I found that said affordability was required as part of it. I think because most cities have an inclusionary ordinance, so if you are a residential development, you're gonna get caught up in that anyways and required to provide affordable housing.
I think our current definition for plan development does have affordability in it.
Yeah, there. We do not follow the current section
know.
of the
Okay.
code.
All right.
It is
Okay.
just the way we've been doing it.
I'll be quiet.
We
I'll let
don't
her
strictly
finish the
apply
staff
the
report.
requirements.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you.
So,
I have a question. Should I ask it now?
go for it.
Okay, so on page 119 of the packet, under applicability, B, applicability, I understand that new development would be subject to the plan development permit, but I'm having trouble with number 2. So for the change, enlargement, expansion, or exterior alteration of an existing structure or use for which a plan development permit was not issued, excluding single family used at a residence. So theoretically, if you got a duplex or a triplex or any kind of multifamily and you want to make exterior alterations, you would be subjected to get a planned development permit?
So, again,
I
and
think you better
don't
leave the
like
old
this
stuff
being on the
alone.
record, but we do not use the existing section of the zoning ordinance the way it is written. Because it is confusing, because it
It's not to me.
requires a plan development for, it says you have to be already zoned plan development, but we don't have anything zoned plan development. There's a number of issues with it, and past leadership, so before our time, the way that we process plan developments now is you are residential, or in some cases, we've done it for some other uses. We do the conditional use permit, and that's how it's been moved.
Exterior alterations other than single family always required a site and architectural, not a CUP. The use is already established, it's a conforming use. The site and architectural took care of alterations,
Yes.
not a CUP. So why so then again, my question is, you're gonna levy the requirement of a planned development permit on existing structures that are gonna make alterations?
That's the existing section of the code.
This is the existing section of the code.
Yeah.
Well, we're talking about planned development permit shall be required for all applicable structures.
That's the.
We're talking about this new process of a planned development
So
permit.
that's the existing section of the code that it's going to go away. That's not our proposed language.
Okay, where is your proposed language?
Tonight is you're giving us guidance so we
Okay,
can
for
write
you to bring
something.
it back.
Yes. We want to see how you feel.
Well, I didn't even,
What direction do you want to go in? Before I have not even written one letter or one number on a paper yet.
Well, I wasn't aware of that, and that wasn't the way it was, a long time ago. So the whole thing of a planned development, we did it with a site and architectural. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I think the whole zoning overhaul, but this one too, is that we want to get to a place where we have a zoning code that the city, the planning commission, staff, developers, the council are comfortable applying fairly and equally into projects. So we want to get to, in this section 1724, permit section, so a plan development permit, a site and architectural review permit section, that we want to, it's written so that we can apply it and use it and understand it. And so for plan development, we're talking about what would you want to put plan developments on? We're talking about this rezoning process because that's pretty common in a lot of other cities, and that's completely different than what we do now. And so we want to get your thoughts on it. How would you want to apply them? Do you want to go in this direction? Do you want to go in a different direction? That's what we'd like to talk to you about tonight.
Well, I agree with David Juboy. It's gonna put an extra time on the rezoning for the process.
So, again, there are advantages to requiring a rezone. One is I can expand it for uses. So you have an interesting use, Mr. Shopping Center, or I don't know, industrial. You don't fit in that specific list I have in that zoning ordinance. You are a list that is not on there. But we think you're a cool use. We'd like to see you. Plan development is an opportunity to allow for those uses that are not in the code. It also, thinking future-wise, because what we do tomorrow, goes on for a while. If we approve it through rezone, that rezone now shows up on the zoning ordinance or the zoning map. So I have a property, I have rezoned it. We would like it to be like plan development / then their file number. And so if I'm a property owner and I don't want to talk to staff and I want to know what my regulations are and I'm looking at that zoning map, I go, wait a minute, I'm a single family. I thought I was R1, but this map says that I am a planned development. And so that triggers them that they have some different set of rules. It also triggers us. If we approve a plan development and we approved it 20 years ago, and someone calls and we open up the zoning map, we're gonna say, oh, you're R1. And if they say, oh, wait a minute, my front yard though is, 5 feet from the, or my front setback is only 5 feet from the front, then we kind of go, oh, wait a minute, there's something somewhere that gave them that, and then we go on a hunt. The rezone is a cleaner process. It is helpful to us. It is helpful to whoever that future property owner is, to kind of give us that extra step of now we know what went on with that project rather than a guess. The disadvantage is that they do have to go to city council. Right now they go to planning commission and they're done. This would require that they then go to city council, who would make the ultimate decision. But again, this is a process that they are used to because they have to do it in the surrounding jurisdictions. So KB, for example, works in all the surrounding jurisdictions. Right now, Hollister is easier or has a shorter process than the rest of them. So it's not something that it's unheard of. We do believe that with the overhaul of the zoning ordinance and kind of cleaning up how we do things and making everything more clear, which is what we're really trying to do with this overhaul, that the process is going to start moving along faster for most people. So the length of time that it takes you today should hopefully, when we're all done, be much faster. So we're trying to, shorten the length of time that you're with us as it is. While we love our applicants, it is better for us if the process is much faster, much cleaner, and easier to execute for us.
I would add to that, and this is only semi-related, but in case the Planning Commission isn't aware, and the public who might be watching or in the audience, the City Council did approve the Development Services Department to begin the implementing Acela, which is an online program for permitting. So that's something that we'll be implementing over this next year, and that's part of just generally regardless of the zoning ordinance, but that's going to help us speed up processing, making everything clear. We're moving electronic, online. So that's just something that I just wanted to throw out. Like, we're in big change process of trying to make everything a lot easier coming to the 21st century. So I thought I'd just say that so you're aware that was something the City Council approved, and hopefully we'll be doing that over this next year and having that implemented.
And then one more advantage of the rezone is that, again, we can expand, we can allow for, some different uses. If they had a parking study and they were a shopping center and they had some specific lists of uses and they wanted a different parking requirement, we could look at it for a PD. If they wanted to add an exciting use to their single-family residential, they say, we have a great idea, we'd like to have these 500 single-family homes, and right in the center, we'd like to have a little neighborhood grocery store. That can be done through the plan development process because, again, we're providing something unique for them. Strict application of the zoning ordinance would be that is not allowed because that property is zoned R1. So it would allow for some maybe mix of uses or some interesting things that developers could start taking advantage of with a cleanup and with the rezone process. Again, we'd like, if you were amenable to it, we'd actually like to allow commercial and industrial projects to apply for a plan development. We think that we could maybe see some interesting uses. We could allow for some uses that sound like a good idea, but for the limitations of a zoning ordinance just are not on that use list. It's most likely a use you just don't see very often, so a city doesn't plan for it. We think that it could allow them, some of these property owners, greater flexibility in how they're using their property. Again, that have to be done through a rezone though. And then, like I mentioned on the other one, perhaps they want to allow some small scale mixed uses on their site. Maybe a industrial development wants, it's hard to think of what they want, but maybe they want a little something different. And again, it's unique, it's a good idea. Strictest application of the zoning ordinance wouldn't allow it, but it's something that the city chose or decided would be a good idea. So that leads me to the end, and I have some specific questions and I need you to answer them so I know how to move on from here. If you have any questions for us before we get to the questions, we can answer them, or we could just head into the kind of questions to each of you so I know which direction we want to head in.
Chairman? It sounds to me like the plan development permit process is sort of taking on the life of the performance overlay zone. Is the overlay, is that what you're doing here? Because the overlay zone already called out for unique lots and setbacks and coverage, and that was the performance overlay. Does that go away and then you'll just have the plan development?
No, our plan is that would still stay, and now you as if we amended it to allow, let's say, commercial, you as I'm in a general commercial zoning district get to apply for a plan development, or I'm in the IBP zoning district, I get to apply for it. But the performance overlay still stays.
It kind of does the same function though. You're doubling up on functions, I believe, because the performance overlay addresses everything that you're talking about. And it just seems like it's more regulation already on top of a pretty good process for getting something approved in the city of Hollister.
So the performance overlay it does do some of the flexibility, but it's only in the residential, as Erica mentioned, and then it doesn't allow for like uses. Like if there was somebody who wanted to do like an urban village on a larger residential property, that even if that's in, let's say, the R3 MPZ zone right now, or it was annexed into the R3 MPZ zone, if it was kind of on the outskirts or something like that in our sphere, if they wanted to do an urban village and they maybe, like Eric was saying, let's take that example, they want to do a little grocery store in the middle of their large project, our performance overlay zone doesn't allow for that.
But doesn't the mixed use allow for it?
Well, if we were rezoning to mixed use, that'd be a mixed use.
Well, you would put it in the general plan as a mixed use area, and then you would further define it with the zoning. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Kevin? I'm just gonna go through it, and we can maybe just take our turns here, but some of the issues here that, number one is that I believe that there should be a plan development process for pretty much all the zones. Industrial, commercial, they should all have that option. I think that the main issue I have is it's going to be very difficult in some cases, for the applicant if he's suggesting a plan development that doesn't have anything to do with use, but it's mainly just setbacks or some issues. It can be possibly classified as a conditional use permit, because for that to go to a rezone and go back to the city council, I think it'd be more appropriate for a rezone, for the city council to consider changes of use or creative uses. That is something that the city council will probably sink their teeth in. But if it's just other issues that could be covered as a conditional use permit, such as what I mentioned, setbacks, variance in parking, maybe some density. But then again, we have to be clear on the threshold here. I'm not really clear on number one. I think we need resolution on what the definition of a plan development is.
So we will
Specifically.
define it better in the amended code, but even if we allow for a plan development, you are still beholden to that density in the general plan. So if the general plan says you have a density range, even with the plan development, you can't, let's say, lower it or increase it. That's more of a general plan amendment. And that would be reiterated depending on where we go from here, if we were we would say,
Yeah.
you know, you still have to conform with the general
Right,
plan.
because I really want to be clear on what is a planned development, what is a conditional use permit, because there's some areas here that are overlapping. And really need clarity on this, because I'm cautioned, I always kind of have some problems with layers of bureaucracy in a way, that are not necessary, that are pretty much what we should be looking at, and city council, what they should be looking at. I don't think that this is a good use of our time and their time to be looking at issues other than density or use, for example. But some of these other peripheral components to a project that are not as significant, I think, can be classified as conditional use permit. I don't think that, I know we haven't even talked about the cost involved with rezone and all that, and the time. I think it's, we have to be careful about that. Those are my concerns.
With the cost factor, as we move forward, we can address, what's the plan development fee now, 8,000?
I don't know it off the top of my head.
We can, even though it's a rezone, we could establish a fee just for a plan development. So because the plan development portion only requires us to write an ordinance, it's not that much extra work. We have to write a resolution anyways. When you, if you recall in the resolution for the plan development, we have in the conditions of approval, we list the rules. So it would, instead of it saying resolution on the front, it just says ordinance on the front. So it's not that much more staff work.
Okay.
So, except for obviously a few more meetings. So the fees can always be discussed. If you chose to go with the rezone, you know, the fee could be discussed.
If we have a clear definition of what a planned development is, knowing that, whether or not your project complies with those definitions, and whether or not it would have to go to a rezone. I'm not clear on what our definition of a planned development is.
So I don't have one right now because like I said, this is the beginning phase. The whole intention of the zoning ordinance overhaul is this zoning ordinance is very confusing. I have been doing planning for a while and it confuses me. What we want is any property owner in the city can open up the zoning ordinance and they say, I would like to apply for a conditional use permit, and they go to that section, and that section clearly says, this is the process. This is what you have to do. This is how they are approved. And the zoning ordinance is not supposed to be complicated. The government code is very complicated when you read that. We don't want to be in that position. We want it so it is easy for everyone to understand. If I give someone a wrong answer, they can come back at me and say, nope, section this says this, you are wrong. It holds us accountable and it makes it better for everyone. That's where we're trying to go with this.
And for it to be easy to understand, we have to have clear
Yes.
definitions on what these
Yes.
options are. What is a conditional use permit? What is a plan, is a conditional use permit differ from a planned development? You know, I'm not clear because there's these gray areas that are some commonalities here that need to be cleared up.
Agreed.
Those are my comments.
Thank you. I had a question, just trying to understand this better. So you have a zone such as maybe R1. That's a zone, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And then you have someone proposing a planned development, and then you tell the applicant, okay, that's going to require a rezone. So are we saying that all properties that are R1 will be subject to the rules of the plan unit development, or just the zone ordinance will just say that property in particular will have these special rules?
So let's take KB, for example, that cluster lot development, because we reviewed it not that long ago. And remember, they didn't meet any of the setbacks and they had substandard size lots. So within that framework of west of Fairview, that little tiny section, all of those would be within that plan development. It's just KB who applied for the cluster lots. They would then come in and say, remember what we said? We said, look, this is a different sort of housing type we don't usually see. They had no front yard setback. The sides were, I believe, shorter. The rear was shorter. The lots were smaller than what was allowed. So if it was KB and they were following this process, we say, okay, yes, these houses are very unique. You know, it's kind of like a middle range price housing because they have a smaller yard, but they're still giving us a 2-car garage so people can park in their garage. And, you know, it's just a unique addition to this west of Fairview area that is all single family, large lot development. And so that KB would be, let's say, rezoned to plan development. Again, once it's rezoned, now we have the established setbacks in an easy, if it was rezoned in this manner, it would be easy for us to understand 20 years down the road, if someone in one of those KB properties calls the city and says, what are my setbacks? Someone is opening up west of Fairview and telling them what the setbacks are. Because there's no way to know unless it's a rezone. And if it's a rezone, then I can pull up the ordinance and I can say, yes, this is what it is. It requires much more discussions, staff time, tracking things down, uncertainty for some property owners with the way that we do it now.
I'm very clear on that.
Yeah.
It does make sense. For somebody who wants to do something, buy
Yeah.
a parcel and a house in the KB development, he wants to do something, he should know what was approved.
And as part of the overhaul, when we get to those other sections, we can discuss setbacks for R1. Do we feel that those setbacks are onerous? Should we change them? That can be part of the discussion. And a change of some of those setbacks might alleviate the need for a planned development because we typically tend to see them for porches.
Yeah, mostly what you guys have seen and in the past and since I've been here is these CUPs for planned unit developments, and we're looking at in the R1 or the R1 LPZ, for example, we see a request to reduce from 6, which is the standard zoning in R1, down to 5 for an interior side yard setback. So, and those are approved, but as Erica kind of alluded to, right now we have to go find the Planning Commission resolution adopting that CUP, and if we can't find that or we don't know what year it was for Roberts Ranch or Mirabella 2 or any of these other planned development approvals, when a property owner comes to us and says, can I build a pool in my backyard? Can I put a porch on the back of my property? We got to go find and see if we can find that resolution, dig through the conditions. Okay, your setback in the rear is 10, so you can go to 10. Whereas if it's on our zoning map, that is a benefit of a true rezone. We say, okay, you're not in the standard R1 zone, you're in your planned development. Let's pull that up, that ordinance, and you can pull it up, we can pull it up, and we can help you find those conditions, if you will, of the zoning.
Yeah, and I'd like to add that, coming from a couple different cities, this is a standard practice, and just for the reasons that we were talking about. I'll give an example on much older cities where setbacks were placed on tentative and final maps. If you don't have a specific reference in a zoning map, no one would ever know that there's special setbacks in that zoning district without going through old dusty files and finding that old rolled up, final map. So this is a tool that is very, very, that's highly used, and it is much more visible. When property ownership changes, especially, and somebody's looking at buying a piece of property and they're doing their research, it's much easier to find out if they have a specific zoning designation that tells them, hey, there's something special about this property. And I think Adriana wanted to mention something.
So Adriana Ortiz, I haven't met you yet. I was the acting development services director for a little bit through 4-Leaf. So just as a reminder, this is a study session. So, and I don't know if you had the privilege of being able to see what we had done in the past, but as a huge overhaul of everything of the zoning ordinance, we found a lot of inconsistencies or contradictions, and I'm sure it had been updated after your tenure, and so that's probably where the confusion's coming from. But this exercise really is for you guys to guide this document. So they're asking, these are more open-ended questions for you to actually give them feedback. So it isn't like a test. And we really wanted you to be a part of the process because we know that you're going to have to make these decisions in the long run. And so we wanted to make sure that you had the ability to tell us what is it you want to see in these documents. This is just one of the applications. There are several other applications that we're looking at that are over the counter. We're looking at, dividing up some of these smaller things that we could do in 24 hours with a tech versus which we don't have in place right now, all the way up to, these larger applications that are taking a little bit more time. But the idea is to streamline. The idea is to make it very simple for applicants and even more so for you guys to make those decisions. So this process is for you. And we're open to whatever suggestions you guys have. And so if you have any questions. Yeah.
And just for a couple points, I worked in a city that did conditional use permits and then switched over to a rezone. And going back to find a conditional use permit for a planned development is so difficult. It is a tremendous amount of staff time. And there were a number where we couldn't make a decision because we couldn't find them. And then it would have to go to the city attorney. And in some cases, their setbacks were their setbacks. They couldn't add on. We're trying to, again, make this easier for people, both for us and for the public. They really should be empowered to get their own answer if they want it and to know what they can do with their property without us getting involved. They might have a specific question that they can't really, get to us in a manner that we would understand. And so, but maybe they open up their regulations. They say, yes, that's, what I want to do. So we'd like to be able to get to that point for them. And that's the whole point of this. One of the points of this overhaul is to get in that direction. And again, not a topic of discussion tonight, but as we roll through this, you probably want to, keep this in the back of your head. As we're rolling through this entire zoning ordinance, we are seeing plan development requests for very similar things. And that is probably something, for the most part, that we could cover in the development standards that are already in the code, and we can craft them in such a way. We have 6 foot side yard. I believe most people are trying to go to a 5. 5 is consistent with many other cities. They do a 5 on the side, and that's probably why those developers want to go with the 5. We are seeing they would like a reduced setback in the front for a porch. A porch is a great idea. You want them close to the sidewalk. It activates the street. It provides a unique element onto a house. That isn't appropriate. Maybe the zoning ordinance allows for a porch to be closer to a certain degree. And so that would eliminate a step for people that they have to go through now, and then would make planned developments this other sort of unique development where they're trying to do something different rather than just this things we're seeing over and over and over again. That is kind of a waste of your time, a waste of everyone's time, and that would be more of a streamlining issue that we could, if you wanted to, discuss when we get to that section.
Okay, any further questions about item 2? Otherwise, I think we can maybe tackle the questions.
I'll go if you want. Question 1, maybe. You're almost got me. I gotta give it some more thought. I'm a thinker, and I can't always do it right. I go home and I think more. Should the plan, number 2, depending on number 1. Should the city allow for greater flexibility? Use is allowed, yes.
No.
And should the city allow planned developments on commercial and industrial? Yes. These are just me. Are there any additional modifications to planning commission? I think the only thing that I'm really getting stuck on, if we do go the plan development, is old stuff. I think you leave it alone. It's whatever it is. It's conforming. It's non-conforming. But certainly we should just move forward if we're going to do plan development permits with new stuff, and make sure we don't subject any alterations, I guess what it says now, but that was always S&A. But anyway, we want to make it easy on people when they want to make exterior alterations to an existing building, aside from historical zone. Okay, that's where I'm at. I mean, I certainly want to be a team player. I think if we have all the staff saying that it's good for us, and I try not to, I gotta tell you, it's really flipping back, because it was 6,000 square foot lot, and I really struggled when we went to the performance overlay zone with the 3,500 square foot lot, which I thought was terrible. But then they keep telling us that smart planning is in and up. Smart planning doesn't have a 6,000 square foot beautiful lot. It doesn't. It just doesn't. And then the affordability factor, because real estate is not cheap in this region, then that was also another reason I said, okay, we got to give the 6,000 square foot lots up. But when we get to the setbacks, I'm definitely going to have some input, because it used to be 10% of the lot width, 6% minimum, 6 foot minimum, 8 foot maximum. And I just think it got too close. You hear a lot of comment. I don't want to get off topic, but there's a lot of comment in town. Those houses are so close on the side yard. But you know what? And I see all the other cities are doing it that way, and maybe that's the way it is. Maybe that's the wave of the future. And certainly I want people, I understand the zoning because it's what I've done, but you're right. People open it up, and it is a difficult thing to read. I don't know that this is going to help them any better, but, you know, I'm always open to make something. The rezoning, you know, that's added cost, and that's another public hearing or two, and that's more public notices. You know, it's 300-foot notices, a separate process from the tentative map or the CUP. It all has to be noticed, and, you know, that the rezoning is a lengthy process sometimes. But that's all my answers. I'm very interested in what the other commissioners
Can I
have to
ask
say.
a follow-up question?
Oh, sure.
You mentioned you don't want it on an existing building, but then you referenced back to that section of the code. Would you, let's say there's a shopping center and now they want to allow some uses and they think a planned development is the way to go. Would you be okay with it, like if the property owner on an existing property?
Oh, yes, I was
do-
really referring to residential
Okay.
of multifamily.
Okay.
So not commercial or industrial, just, you know, the old duplexes and triplexes. If we could, you know, don't require them to change that.
All right. So this is how.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Chairman.
No problem. This is how I would like to proceed. So I think we should take one question at a time and just and see if we can see if we have a consensus on
Okay.
each question. So I'll start with question one. I'll go ahead and give my take on it. So for question one, so there was an example given initially about, you know, a conditional use permit where, say, someone had 20, they're allowed 20 parking spaces, but then their karate studio ended up getting super busy and they're overflowing the lot. Then that conditional use permit could be revoked based on the finding that you know, they're not respecting the 20 spaces. So the conditional use permit, to me, it sounds like it's something you're granting permission based on conditions that can be revoked, but which is appropriate for the karate studio. But when we're talking about a planned development, we're talking about something that's going to be built in a certain way, and then it's kind of permanent. It's set in stone. It's not based on human behavior. It's based on something that was constructed and it's sitting there permanent. So how would you revoke a conditional use permit on something that's already been built? So to me,
I would personally not want to, but you know.
So to me, for question one, I believe it is not appropriate. A conditional use permit is not appropriate for planned development requests. So anyone have a different take on that?
My take, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
My take is that we started talking about what a conditional use is. That in some land use designations, we have permitted uses, and some we have conditional uses. There could conceivably be a planned development request based on a permitted use. Correct? So if the question one, is a conditional use permit appropriate for, yeah, for some, but not for all? Because you can have a planned development based on a permitted use. You could have a planned development, for example, I'll give you an example, based on like a residential component to a mixed-use building where they can't meet the open space requirement. So he's requesting a planned development because he's doing something creative with the overall proposal. That's based on the permitted use.
We did that on Hawkins Street, right there behind 7-Eleven.
Mm-hmm.
Because they couldn't meet the
Yeah.
yard requirement.
So, yes, it can be, thank you, Carol.
For the open space.
So, question one, is conditional use appropriate for, yes, for some, but maybe not for all? That's how I'll answer number one.
I do, not to interrupt, but I do want to point out that we've talked about parking and some other things. We are trying to amend the code. So right now, for the most part, your only relief is the plan development. We don't want that to be true anymore. We'd like to have, maybe you want a parking reduction, maybe you want some shared parking, and it makes sense, and there's a whole different process for that. We're gonna make it easier on you as long as you can prove to us that it works. Again, with the setbacks, we keep seeing the same things over and over again. That sends a signal to us that maybe we're doing something wrong, and so we look at that. Again, we're seeing it for side yard and front yard a lot for the porches. So while we're saying use, a development standard is not technically a use. That is a development standard in the code, and they're asking for a waiver from that standard. So yes, the use is okay, but the purpose of a conditional use permit is I'm putting some conditions on your use to ensure that you don't create a burden on the neighbors. And if you did, I now have a way to revoke said use. If you are a setback, the conditional use permit is an interesting approach to do it, but we're not going to revoke your setback once you're built. So even though the word use is in there, a setback is a development standard.
Okay. So if what you're saying is that there can be an application that is on a permitted use, but it's conditional use permit because there's conditions that are associated with a permitted use. That would create a conditional use?
Yes.
Okay.
For use.
Okay.
Setbacks, height, lot coverage, that's a development
Based
standard.
on a permitted use, then I'll say,
Yeah.
if that's true, then I'll go ahead and say yes to
It's
question
a little
one.
awkward.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I would add too that one thing that doesn't depend on if it is a rezone or what process we get to with the planning commission's input, but sometimes you'll see a conditional use permit actually come through. Like, I don't know if all of this commission was part of it, but in the past we've approved on Industrial Drive some gyms with conditional use permits, or a karate studio is actually one that we've done a conditional use permit on. And that approval is called just conditional use permit 2020-1 or whatever it is. Whereas when you see planned development permits come to you, we call them conditional use permit 2020-1 for a planned unit development. So it has a different name. And one thing I'd like to get to potentially is just calling it planned development permit. So that would just be PD 2020-1. And so then that might help with just the name convention of, if that, I don't know if that's a helpful statement or not.
I don't know if I mentioned it before, but what we'd like is, if you are okay with the rezone, we would establish the zoning designation map would be PD / the application number, so that we can find it really easy. And it's like quick to find it rather than this like PD combining district. Those are very hard to still figure out. We think the most appropriate path, while a little different than most cities, would be PD / the application number. So we go right to be able to pull it up.
I saw that within Morgan Hill, they had combining districts.
Most do. Some cities that I noticed had recently gone from a conditional use permit to a rezone, they now do the number for, I think, ease of staff and ease of a property owner. How would a property owner know where to look if they were trying to go through city records? Even amongst staff, we have a hard time. So I think that's why they're heading, and we think that that would be a nice option if you're okay with it, just because, again, we want full transparency and we want to make it easier on everyone.
All right. Anyone else have a take on question 1?
I'm gonna mirror David Dubois' comments on number 1.
Okay. So just to recap, Commissioner Huboy, so is it, your answer is
It is yes.
always yes, always no,
It
or
is yes
sometimes?
with the caveat, the clarification on, because I get, we started off saying, what is a conditional use, what is a permitted use, and that got me off on some issues on number 1 that was clarified by Erica. So I'll say yes.
Okay. All right. Any other inputs on question 1? Okay. So it sounds like we're kind of split on question 1. So we move on to question 2. Anyone have a take on that one?
This question 2 is where I really need more information on question 2 before I can say yay or nay. I don't think we have enough information tonight for me to comfortably respond to question 2, because when you're taking more time, kicking it back to the city council and all this, we need to know, I have to be really clear on the reasons why, and I don't think I really have that clarity tonight.
What would be helpful for us to bring back to you?
I want more clarity on the definition of a planned unit
Okay.
development.
It's in the zoning, isn't it?
And then the process probably as well?
Yeah, on the process. Because that's really, to me, question 2 is the one that, to me, is really, really important. To really have enough information, so we're all clear on what the definitions are and reasons why it has to be rezoned. And the other thing that I can understand for the staff, to have it rezoned, without having to go back and doing all this research, and for the new homeowner to know what the planned unit development setbacks are, but there may be another way on your zoning map to indicate whether or not there was some flexibility on those development regulations without having to rezone. I'm not really sold on that. I think you could have maybe a dash line around that property and with saying this was a planned unit development, such and such number, but it's still part of that zone without having to go through a rezone. I'm not sold on why you have to rezone that particular piece of property and go through the extensive procedure because you have clarity on what those new setbacks and regulations are. There may be another way of doing it on your zoning map. I'm not sure about if that's the only way to go.
I think, David, they're trying to make sure in the future that everybody's well aware of what it is.
Yes.
And maybe it's simpler to just have a simple rezone so that the information is all in one spot. they're not looking to see if it's a planned development, it'll just already say on the zoning map. I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a way to do it, identify it anyway.
Could
But
be
if you
another
go
way
with
of
the
doing it, yeah.
process, It'll just say this is the zoning and it's a planned development zoning.
Yes, thank you. I'm clear on that, but there
know.
could be another way of doing it.
I hear you.
I have to think about that some more. I'm not prepared to give you an answer, yea or nay, on it tonight. This is really you know, what we're talking about is really very important.
It's all important when you're getting ready to do this project, general plan.
And I appreciate all your research and all what you've done so far.
So, Commissioner Huboy, so I have just a question. So, for question 2, so what is so we know about 2 different vehicles for getting a planned planned development done. One is the conditional use permit, other one is a rezone. So we know that we're doing CUPs now here. We know that all the jurisdictions around us are doing rezones. So is there a third option that you were thinking of that could be a vehicle for doing a plan unit development?
Instead of having a rezone?
Yes, and not a conditional use permit.
I would say, oh, gosh, a third option is, well, your question was whether or not it would have to be a rezone or for a plan unit development. What was can you restate that? I'm not clear what your question is.
The question is should a plan development section be revised so that a plan development is approved through a rezone? So it's basically saying that the vehicle to get it done is a rezone.
I think that possibly I would say yes, based on a clear definition. So, you know, because it has to be a threshold where it's significant enough to go back to city council. What that threshold is not clear to me tonight. I don't know what the threshold, and I want to know what the threshold is for saying, okay, this is a rezone. And we're clear on it because we have clear definitions.
Any other takes on question 2? Okay, so I think I'm a yes on question 2. Mr. Huboy's, I need more information. Any other feedback for that one? Okay, we can talk about question 3. Should the city allow for greater flexibility in uses allowed? What are your thoughts?
I say yes.
Yes.
Okay, that's a yes. Question 4, should the city allow planned developments on land designated for commercial and industrial?
Yes.
Yes.
It's a yes from me. Question 5, are there any additional modifications the planning commission would like to include in the draft planned development ordinance?
I probably, once I see the draft, I know you want direction, but a lot of times, once I see the draft, then, you know, you'll have more comment.
This was if you had something at the top of your head and you're like, I want this in here, then we catch it now.
Yeah.
But if nothing, it's.
But I mean, you're gonna have public hearings on the draft and more commission discussion, and we're gonna hear from the public, and then we might, you know, have more things to include.
I
know you're looking for direction, and it's not easy when you don't get it.
No.
Why do you want it? That's why you're gonna be creative.
Yeah, I don't know if modifications is the correct word, but I just need more information and clarity on some of the things that I've already mentioned. To bring it back and talk after we made some progress here because we've got consensus on a lot of this.
We actually do, so I think what I would like to do, and you tell me if you're okay with this or not okay with this, a majority is kind of heading towards the rezone, so I could draft the ordinance for a study session, not for public hearing, and then also come in with, this is the process that we would make you follow if you did a rezone. The ordinance will establish like what a plan development is, who can apply for one.
There you go. Right.
And then we can walk you through what we envision as the steps, how long do we envision it would take. I can pull some examples of some ones that we've approved, let's say in the last 2 years, and we can look at what were we really approving those for, to kind of have some background information. Also, if we're constantly approving them for the same thing, again, that might be something that we want to talk about. Because if it was already in the zoning ordinance, we've just eliminated a step for everyone and a permit fee. So I could go that path if you want, but I suggest a study session, not a public hearing. It's up to you.
Any thoughts on whether it should be a public hearing or another study session?
Well, in study sessions, you normally take public comment.
Yeah.
It's not a public hearing, but if you wanna know what truly serve the public, then you always let them speak.
I'd like to see this be subject to public hearing.
Want a public hearing?
Yes. Because it affects a lot in our community that we're talking about this. We're talking about this tonight, and then once everything's said and done, you've got the community of designers, community of builders, community of building practitioners, and that this affects a lot of people in our community. And but I don't know if they're going to know about it to come into a public hearing. I don't know how we're going to do that, but I'd like to see the public, a little bit more public awareness. Somehow we can promote this to the general public so that they see what their thoughts are.
Commissioner Hugh Boyd, there will be a public hearing regardless. So I think what Eric is proposing is that there would be a study session and then a public hearing.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Another study session.
So,
Okay.
so if this assists at all, this would be at a study session where you get to look at the draft and give us comments, not like where we come and say, here, look at this, give a recommendation to the city council. So this would be another opportunity for a discussion, go over it. We may or may not pull plan development out of phase 2 because we have some projects that are non-residential that would like a plan development. So we can talk about that at the study session, whether or not we want to pull it out. But if we had the study session, let's say you had some minor comments or no comments at all, this would not then go to public hearing until that entire 17.24 goes. So this is one of many steps before we have that full section complete. And we anticipate a number of study sessions on each section of this chapter where we kind of flesh it all out, we get it ready to go, and then we start with public hearings. And there'll probably be several public hearings because there's so much in this that people have the opportunity to speak at a study session, they'll have opportunity to speak at a public hearing, and this is a long process.
Man, and I was so hoping you'd have it all done before I got back. Just to be honest, journal plans are dry. It was never my favorite document, but it's the most important document of the city. It addresses all of the infrastructure in the city, not just planning. You know, I'm going to suffer through it, but I was really hoping that you'd be done. Babe, but we're going to get it done together, right, guys?
Yes, we are.
We're going to get it done, and our name's going to be in that document.
Yes.
We're going to work hard on it. And I look forward to it.
And if there's ways that we can get the word out to the public, you know, if we can try to do that, I really appreciate that. Yeah.
We used to do the informational ads.
Because there's a lot of
it's a little larger than the public hearing
designers
grant.
and who need to know and probably have some good participation and some insight on.
I want to know what Ann Hall has to say.
Yes.
I always do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Or Matt Kelly.
I do, or Matt. I
Yeah.
do seek out her
Uh-huh.
advice occasionally.
Right.
It's her area.
And there's other people, like, Marcus Building Systems, Paul Huff Construction, the Intravias. I mean,
Sure. If we could just get him to participate.
just to get them to participate. But I want them to feel like they have a sense of ownership in
Yeah.
this too, because it's important not only to us, it's important to them.
Well, you want to get it good. They're better for themselves if they participate. Otherwise, we're to pass stuff they don't like.
Yeah,
right.
commissioners, we
Yeah.
hear what you're saying, and I'm really glad you're saying this. So that's something the council really wanted as well. So we'll look at some vehicles that maybe are a little bit more unique and try to, our website could definitely use some help, and and being getting those and celebrating what we're doing and inviting people. If we have a schedule of study sessions, try to get those out so people know what sections maybe we're working on. So we'll look into that.
And speaking of the city council, are we have any joint meetings scheduled in the future?
So as you guys are aware, we scheduled out these regular study sessions with the Planning Commission so we can do exactly what we're doing today and talk about 1 or 2 sections at a time and just kind of work through doing this whole overhaul. I'm in communications with the city manager because they're obviously open to, these study sessions are open to become a joint session, but I know that the city manager's office and city clerks are having difficulty pinning down a majority of the council. So we'll definitely let you guys know and the council if they're coming to any one of these sessions, and we'll, as staff, if we know that ahead of time, we'll try and make it a big one, an important one, so that you guys all can talk about it together. But for now, unless otherwise known, we're just going to keep going with Planning Commission and bring the council in whenever they're available to come into these.
So my apologies, I should have outlined this at the beginning because we have a new planning commission member, but the zoning ordinance overhaul, we had that joint study session. We said we're gonna break this up into 3. So the first phase was where we are inconsistent with state law, and you've looked at SB 9, which is that 2-unit housing development, ADUs, accessory dwelling units, and density bonuses. So those items are going to the council on the 21st, and hopefully they get adopted, and then phase 1 is hopefully complete, unless the state decides to pass any more laws and we have to go back and fix those sections, but we will hope they do not. Phase 2 was supposed to be, when we had discussed it, site and architectural review only, because we wanted to get that cleaned up, make the process a little bit easier. Then when we discussed it, many months passed, staff came to you and said, we realized when we started looking at it, we couldn't just do one section. We have to do it all in this chapter 17.24. And to do it all is a lot of work. And so we had kind of pulled out that phase 2A, and the rest of it became phase 2B. And phase 2B is every section within 17.24 now. And our intention, as we discussed it before, was to have, if it's a difficult subject, we bring it to you, we ask you questions, you tell us which way you'd like to go, then we go back and write it. If it's not really something that we feel like is controversial or is kind of too crazy, maybe just the section on how a public hearing is conducted, whatever it might be, then we would just draft it for you to look at. We anticipate that this is going to take, if we are lucky, 9 months plus, because it is a lot of work. And then once it's done, we've had several study sessions, we've worked it out. Then we move on to public hearing. We will probably have several public hearings because it is so much. It wouldn't be fair to the public to drop it all at once. We get it ready to go, and then it goes up to council, and then this section is adopted. Once that is done, Then the rest of the work begins, and it is every section in the zoning ordinance: parking, landscaping, fences, definitions, everything will get overhauled. And then again, that is probably a year plus. In the meantime, if a law gets changed, if the planning commission decides that something really isn't working, R1 setbacks or a use or whatever it is, we can work that in. Those are minor amendments that we can discuss and maybe make. The rest of it is a major overhaul. So hopefully in 2 years, we have a brand new zoning ordinance that is easy to read. It is easy to understand. It has uses that are current with what is happening in the world today. There are definitions for all of those uses. The parking is consistent with today's standards. And it is, again, easy to understand, easy to interpret, lists out permitting requirements, again, user-friendly, you can hold us accountable, and that sort of thing going forward. But this is a 2-year or longer process. This is a long one.
This is study session 1.
Good luck.
This was a good one.
Well, I haven't heard the dreaded ad hoc, and I'm really glad to hear that. Because I really like working as a growth.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of ad hoc. I go, they're gonna ad hoc, they're gonna ad hoc. I'm not gonna get on that. But I like working with 5, and you know, it's better, I think. I mean, I know sometimes you gotta have maybe a little bit of preliminary guidance, but I really like to do it up here. So that's good to know. We're gonna have a lot of meetings. You know, you might go faster than you think, because telling you, the public doesn't really get involved on planning until it's too late. And, you know, so you don't know how many speakers you're gonna get here. I'm sure the development community will turn out. But sometimes they can be a guide as well, because they do live in the real world. I always appreciate good developers' outlook on development. They're in the biz. Yeah. Thank you, Erica.
Thank you for helping me.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Jeffrey, I apologize, and I don't know that I had a good cut in, but you did write down for public comment on both items. Did you still want to speak, or? You're good. Okay. Okay. Then I have no speakers on the item. Sorry about that.
Okay, so are we done with item 2? Okay. Okay, we'll move on to planning department reports.
I don't believe I have any reports.
Okay. We'll move on to planning commission reports. So
go ahead. I'm
oh,
sorry.
okay,
I'm
no
sorry.
problem. I was just gonna say I wanted to be the first one to welcome Commissioner Lenore to the Planning Commission. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for her.
He was my planning commissioner.
Yeah. And
I really appreciated him. He's a code guy.
Yeah,
You
so
got to stay on top of things if you want to talk. He's code guy. Yeah, I had to get it out a few times. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, it's I couldn't imagine a scenario where we would both be on the commission because we live in the same district.
Right.
But I wasn't thinking about the
the mayor's
large
spot.
position. Yeah.
I was very blessed by Mia to ask me. Yeah, I didn't ask. I didn't. You know, there's a story I said to my husband. I wonder who she's going to ask for planning commission. Oh, maybe she'll ask me. Oh, maybe she won't. And I looked at her and go, maybe I should just be done. And he goes, yeah, maybe. And then she came over the next day. And she says, I want to ask you a favor. And I go, okay. She goes, would you consider being on the planning commission? I go, yes.
Yeah.
And I very much look forward. It's nice to meet you. Dolores Morales is my council person. And it's so nice to meet you, Luke. I look forward to working with all of you guys. And I definitely am going to probably enjoy it. You know, planning's best. Politics, not so good. So the less you send to the council, the better. Sorry. Yeah. Thank you. That's all I have.
Any other reports from the
I
planning commission?
also want to thank Adriano Ortiz for her work as an interim planning director, and our new director, Christy
Yes.
Hopper. Welcome on board.
Exciting, very exciting.
Yeah, and again, I just took the wind out of my sails about Carol Lenore. You know, we've known her for a long time. Always enjoyed working with her, and wealth of experience. And it's
Well,
just very
David,
valuable.
I always looked at you for the site architectural guidance. You got the eye. I don't have that eye. And I tell him, David, is that good? Is that good? Do you think that's good? Because he's into architectural enhancement. That's what I like. So I've learned a lot from you.
Right, and I personally want to thank Roland Resendez for reappointing me to the commission, and the other city council persons. Appreciate that. It's been, I guess I'm going on my 19th year now.
Long time.
Yeah.
I used to deliver the packets to you. Remember? To the
Yes.
hospital. I was the girl that did it all. I delivered the agenda to him for years. Yeah.
That's great.
Okay, any other reports? Okay, can we get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We have a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
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 Aye. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Let's see, I have to turn it off somewhere. Anyways, I'll just leave it. Well,
I already missed it. I'm not gonna go home and do nothing.
Here we go, Mo.